I sold a majority stake of the company for $32.5 million.
That's Eran Galperin. He took a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu side project, turned it into a niche SaaS company, and cashed out for $32 million. And that's likely just the beginning.
If things go according to plan, it would actually be worth more than the initial exit.
Eran is a FIRE guy. If you don't know, that means financial independence, retire early. He's been building his finances in his career with one singular goal in mind, that early retirement. This is one of those rare moments where the dream actually plays out. No co-founder drama, no messy exits, just a quiet SaaS success story that turned a side project into $30 million payday and counting. And that's not even counting the biggest change of all, a move to Japan, where he and his wife are building a luxury home and settling into their new post-exit life abroad. In this episode, we'll cover the cost of the move, the unexpected downsides, the expected upsides, and how getting out the restrictive FIRE mindset and embracing a new life of modest luxury. I'm Harry Morton, and this is Moneywise, a podcast not about how to make money, but how your life changes after you do. It was made for members of Hampton, actually, a private vetted community of high net worth founders looking for people going through the same crazy experiences of building, growing, and oftentimes exiting a company. I'm a member, and I know firsthand that building a company can be isolating, and connecting with others going through the same thing has been game-changing for me personally. I've learned a lot, I've made great friends, and honestly, I feel more confident as a founder. So if you're a CEO or a founder doing at least 3 million ARR, check it out at joinhampton.com. All right, so before we get to Japan and learn all about how much it costs to make the move, what the expenses are like living there, and how Eran optimized financially for it, let's see what we're working with here. Let's get the story of how Eran built his way to $32 million.
Personally, it was always the concept of being independent and controlling my own destiny in a way. I definitely had periods in my life where I worked for other people. It never felt like this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. When I was working as a CTO in LA for a mid-sized e-commerce company, I was in a very comfortable situation. There were still times where I felt like, if I was in a position to influence the direction of the company, I would do things differently. That kind of feeling, especially when you have had that experience previously, kind of builds up in you.
Eran knew what he wanted to do, so he did it. He started a startup.
At some point, me and a good friend of mine sat down and decided to start a startup. Back then, I had no idea what any of that meant. We failed miserably, of course, but we learned a ton.
And then he did it again.
Built a couple more companies together.
Those didn't work either, but he kept at it.
Eventually, built a proper startup that raised VC funding. This was all the way back in 2010. We started a company. We joined a startup accelerator called 500 Startups and raised a seed round after that.
Except even then, it still didn't work.
The company ended up not going anywhere. And in 2015, we wound down the company.
So what was your financial situation like at that point?
We ran it as first-time VC-backed founders would, and we paid ourselves very little. When we wound down the company, I was left with not a lot in the bank, maybe $15K in the bank was what I had, and I needed to stretch it out as long as I could. But eventually that, that runs out. You live in California, the things cost money, rent, food, stuff like that. And getting that gig at that e-commerce company, eventually the CTO role, after a while was the first time that I actually had significant money in the bank that I could potentially invest. I got into the FIRE methodology, financial independence, retire early. It's based on some math that if you have a certain level of assets, you invested in the market, and you only take out a small, certain amount, about 4% a year, 99% of the times you would never run out of the money. That appealed to me greatly. And I started calculating, okay, what kind of net worth I would need to comfortably retire. I started putting benchmarks for myself, and those benchmarks continue to evolve over time. I never imagined that I would sell a company 7 years later for 8 figures. At that time, I was like, okay, do I need 1 million to retire? Do I need 1.5 million?
Do you remember where you first heard about it? Were you on a Reddit forum or
Yes.
Can you remember where you discovered it? Yeah.
Yeah, I did discover it on Reddit. That is correct.
Yeah. Awesome.
I think also some of the people I was working with in LA mentioned it to me. It's like I heard it in passing previously and I looked into it. It's like I actually had an idea of FIRE before I encountered it directly. My idea was much more naive. Maybe I was like, wow, a lot of those mutual funds in the US, they return an average 10% a year. If I can live comfortably from 100K, all I need is 1 million and just take out 10% a year. I didn't know about sequence of returns and all of that stuff. But once I read FIRE, it's like, okay, this sits exactly with what I was thinking. I just need to be a little bit more careful. I still to this day subscribe to the Financial Independence subreddit and a few of the other ones. And I read it, when I'm in the airport or on the way to the doctor or whatever. Yeah, because I'm into that kind of stuff.
After getting a ton of learning experiences under his belt, Eran came away with the two main ideas that ultimately led to his success, finally. The first was that if the whole idea of FIRE was attractive because it meant life on his terms, that meant he had to truly do it on his terms.
I decided that the experience I had with VC-funded startup was not what I had envisioned. I wanted to try bootstrapping this time.
The second thing he learned, if he was going to go deep, it had to be a business that fit his life, not one that forced him to build a life around it.
I also wanted to marry it to a personal interest of mine. I'm like, okay, if I'm going to invest years of my life into this, I want to work on something that I connect deeply to. And my biggest hobby at the time was Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I'm training 4 or 5 days a week. I looked into a few different directions. I initially avoided going into this space specifically because there were several very large entrenched companies already in it. Companies that are in the 100 to 200 million in ARR companies. I'm like, how can I compete with a company like that? Knowing what I know now, that's actually a good thing. I did my own validation journey. I spoke with a bunch of gym owners and it's like, what do you like, what you don't like about the current tools you're using? And everybody, not a single person that I talked to actually liked the tools they're using. That told me maybe there's still a gap. What I know now, and this is a story that you see in a lot of B2B verticals, there's a lot of entrenched players that provide outdated, difficult to use tools that nobody likes. And they're basically a sales operation now. They start really being a technology company. They built a product 20 years ago and it kind of stayed that way.
Right.
And there's plenty of room for an agile company to come in and disrupt with a modern user experience or just a little bit, just changing things just a little bit. Those verticals are massive and there's a lot of room. So I'm glad that I entered it when I did.
And what was growth like during that period then?
Very slow. Yeah, we closed the first year with 1K in MRR. So it took me 1 year to get to $1,000 in recurring revenue per month.
The slow SaaS ramp of death, right?
Yeah. For the first 4 years, I basically thought of it as a side project that I never know if it would amount to anything. But I continued to listen to customers. When they said something that clicked with me, I'm like, yeah, I'm going to put it back into the product. Continuing to make sure that, if there's issues, they're taken care of. Because I connected with the users on a personal level. Those are gym owners that I interact with in my personal life as well. Second year ended up 3.5K in MRR. Third year, 7.3. So you can already see somewhat of a trajectory there, but it felt very slow at the time. Like third year, I added 4K in MRR the entire year. By the end of the fourth year, or somewhere in the middle, we hit about 12K in MRR, which is still, it's very small, but for me, it felt like, this can replace my full-time salary working as a CTO. And then I can devote myself 100% to the business. So rather than 100%, just work on it as much as I want, which was my ultimate goal. One of the benefits of starting a company, bootstrap, and as a solo founder, is that you're not beholden to anyone. So if you have a week where I'm like, you know what, I don't feel like working, I'll answer some support emails, but I'm not doing anything this week, or maybe several weeks. But then you get this crazy inspiration. It's like, oh, wow, this customer mentioned this tool that I can't believe we still don't have this. And you work like crazy for a week to get it out, and then you take a break. This is what you can do when, you're bootstrap and you don't have other people depending on you.
I think it's quite common with successful entrepreneurs often, actually, is this sort of like periods of real intense activity. I can't remember who, I've heard someone sort of refer to it as like, I don't know, I'm gonna mess this up, but like something like the way that like a lion will feast, for example, right? They'll hunt, they'll eat like everything that they need, and then they'll just like sleep for like days, and then they'll go again. And that sort of like, really leaning into that rather than trying to be sort of structured and regular. Mr. Beast talks about it all the time, how he will just like go for days basically without sleep when he's like really inspired, and then he'll just crash out and like break and then come back again and go again.
Right. Even though, Mr. Beast works in a very creative industry.
Yeah.
When you run a technology company, there's definitely a set of things that you have to get done. Otherwise, the company will start crumbling. But when you raise VC money, you're also put on a very short timeline. You have 18 to 24 months to hit your benchmark to raise another round. So you have to move fast. You can't move at your own pace. And my take on this is that there's a bunch of really great companies, potentially, that are just not living on the VC timeline, that end up getting crushed by this like timeline. And this is what I felt happened in our previous company. Sometimes you can't force product market fit. It takes time to get there. And with this company, definitely I took the time. This company would not have survived if I raised VC money. It took us 4 years to get to 12K in MRR. And then it took us 4 more years to get to 3 million in ARR. When you look at it, it does seem like, you just kept going and it's like a hockey stick. It definitely doesn't feel like that. Sometimes you just need time to let things happen.
At this point in the timeline, Eran's life was on the verge of a massive shift. The big payday was just around the corner. But before he made it to that money, something else changed. Something that you could argue was actually even bigger than the exit itself. Japan.
I moved to the US in 2011. I was living there for over a decade, and I didn't like the direction the country was taking. I had a few health concerns that came up. I went through the whole health/insurance system in the US. And in the US, it always seems like you're one big health issue away from financial ruin. I'm talking about before the exit. Back then, this is how it seems like. And it's always looming over you. Me and my wife started discussing potentially moving to a different country. It was very important to me that it would be a country with public healthcare. We looked at some countries in Europe, also considered Israel and Japan. I have been in Japan multiple times previously, a few times on business. The VC that actually invested in my previous company was a Japanese VC that has offices in the Bay Area. They invited us to a couple of conferences there. I really liked it. It's a very organized, clean society. The quality of life here is really incredible. Me and my wife went together, and we decided, this is probably going to be our last big adventure or move before we settle down with kids. So why not? Why not give Japan a try? My wife is also Japanese American, so she had that in her back pocket.
Of course, Eran being Eran, the move to Japan wasn't just a lifestyle decision. It was a carefully optimized financial play. And before they could land in Tokyo, there was one important layover.
The idea was, this is back in 2019, we were living in California. California has a very high state income tax. And I knew that at some point I would probably sell the company. If I moved directly to Japan from California, California would still be taxing me. It's one of two states in the US that do this. And it's very grabby. It's very hard to convince California, yeah, you actually moved and you're not coming back. And if you do come back, they would make you pay back taxes. So we moved to a zero-income state, Texas. We had a trip planned for April 2020 to come and scout out potential places to move to. And then the COVID started in March, and Japan completely closed off to visitors. We ended up, in a way, getting stuck for 2.5 years in Austin.
How much did it cost to move to Tokyo?
It was actually not very expensive. We wanted to move our life there, so we moved quite a bit, about $4,000 all in with the move. Getting a place in Japan is expensive. There's a lot of upfront costs. It comes to about 6 months worth of expenses to get into a place. There's the deposits. There's something called key money, which is basically a bribe from the World War II era, because there was a shortage of housing back then. There's agency fees. You have to go for an agency to rent. But then everything else, like food is cheaper, basic services, it's all cheaper. Health insurance is basically nothing. Compared to the US, I pay maybe $50 a month. I remember the first couple of times that I went to the doctor, and I go back and show my wife, look at the receipt. I paid $4 for this doctor visit. Or I paid $2 for this medicine at the pharmacy. And she's like, wow. So you can have really good quality of life there without spending a lot. So yeah, definitely Tokyo is on the more expensive side in Japan. But if you compare it to the expensive cities of the world like LA, London, even Tel Aviv, it's way cheaper. Every time that we visit my wife's family in LA, we're always a little bit sticker shocked by how much it seems like it's also accelerating. We went in November last year. You go to the most basic Vietnamese restaurant, it's nothing special, and you pay $40 per person. I'm like, how? Here we go to an amazing, it's street food, is hole in the wall, kind of similar level, and you pay maybe $8, $10 per person. And there's no tip, there's no tax. It's just what's on the menu, that's what you pay. Just day-to-day living here and living well is just not very expensive.
Again, all of this was before the exit, though financially he was still doing pretty well.
When we moved, I was already around $700K in ARR. We were very profitable all the way up to the exit. So I was personally bringing in about 300, 400K at that point, and it continued to increase from there. So I didn't feel like stressed for money at all. You can easily live in the nicest places in Tokyo with that level of income.
Today, Eran's investment into his life in Japan is a little more elevated, and we'll get into his luxury home in just a bit. But first, it's time for the exit. And here's the thing. No business strategy or spreadsheet can prepare you for what life's like after a major exit. The numbers are one part of the story, but figuring out how to actually live differently, that's something you can only learn from people who've been through it, frankly. That's why being a part of Hampton has been so valuable for me. It's a private community of founders who are going through the same stuff, scaling, selling, starting over, and sharing the kind of advice that you just won't find on a business course or frankly anywhere online. I'm obviously saying this because the podcast is for and by the Hampton community, so it's a nice fit for us to plug it in. But honestly, it's just been an incredible, valuable resource for me personally. If you've got any kind of value from this podcast and you want even more intimate connections, including real in-person events, so it's not just the online world, you should really give it a look. If you're running a business doing 3 million in ARR or more, go and check it out at joinhampton.com. But anyway, right, let's get back to Eran's deal and how it went down.
Circa 2021, I started receiving inbound from private equity firms, which I initially ignored because the language they use is very vague. I don't know if you've ever seen one of those emails, but they tell you, are you interested in raising growth equity? And to my, naive ears, it's like, yeah, I'm not interested in raising VC money, so no, thank you. Eventually, one of those emails was more direct. It's like, are you interested in selling your company? And I started taking those conversations. Over the course of 2 years, I spoke to about 40 different private equity firms. And I started getting a good handle on the lay of the land. There's a bunch of different types of private equity firms, from search funds to roll-ups to holdcos, and sizes. And I started to getting a clear idea of what an ideal outcome would be. I was running this monthly/annual projection model, and amazingly, we were tracking it quite well. It's like we were growing in lockstep with it, and like by the end of 2023, I think we'll hit it. And I started mentally preparing to see if I can go on the market and sell the company at that point. But before we even went to market, one of my previous contacts that I already spoke to reached out to ask, what's the timeline? Because, I've been giving an estimate of when I would be going to market. And we told them, we're next month or in 2 months, we'll finish the sale and we'll go to market. And they asked if I would be interested, discussing a potential offer now to see if we can do this before I go to market. And I was speaking with my broker, and he's like, if this is the initial offer, maybe it's worth going to market. I asked him, okay, so what do we do with this offer? Do we just decline and say, we'll get back to you? And said, you know what, let's counter with an amount that if they say yes, you go off the market right now. This is a negotiation tactic that I would never have thought of myself. Also, the number that he suggested was, let's add 10 million to their offer. And it's like, do you think they would take it? He said, let's give it a shot. And they did. So I sold a majority stake of the company for $32.5 million. And I also have some rolled over equity, which means that if things go to plan and they have another liquidity event in 5-6 years, I will get to participate in that as well. Also, it's something that keeps me engaged and motivated to contribute after the exit. Yeah.
And so did that 35, I mean, that's incredible. Congrats. Like, how did you get 100% of that? Like, you were a solo founder, right? Were you the only sort of equity holder at this point?
We joined the Tiny Seed Accelerator, so they take 10%. I had 90%. So most of the equity, we rolled over different amounts. So they actually rolled over more equity from their share than me. So the final amount, how it breaks down, is a bit more complicated. But let's say 30 went to me. There was also a seller note involved, so I didn't get the full amount immediately. I gave them a seller note for 3 years, which also bears interest. And there were a few other mechanisms there that diluted me to a degree, like we needed to establish an option pool before the sale when I was still the majority stakeholder. But at the end of the day, the outcome was amazing, and I was very happy with how it went down.
Yeah, I'm sure you were. I mean, it's awesome, man. Like, what is your net worth today?
Net worth today is, well, if you include the seller note that still has not matured, it's around 30. Let's say 32 million. I also had the company was doing well in the years leading up to the sale. So before the exit, I had around 3 million in net worth. I also previously invested a little bit in crypto and did okay there. So that contributed to that. But yeah, definitely the sale is the bulk of it.
You kept 50% equity. So how much is that worth?
Now it's worth about, I want to say 5 million. Mm-hmm. But if the company hits its goals, let's say we make it to 30 million in ARR and we sell for a 10x multiple, which is not outlandish for a company at that scale, it would be worth about 45. So after taxes, that's another 30 million. It's more than the initial exit in a way.
These numbers are obviously huge already, and to take 90% is incredible. What's even more inspiring is what this meant for Eran. Fire had been his life goal, and 32 million definitely reaches that, and then some. But if we've learned anything from this show, it's that exiting a company is far from just a financial experience. Even if the goal is monetary, letting go of something you built from the ground up is an emotional experience. For Eran, that main emotion was simply relief.
I think one of the biggest misconceptions is that when you finish the sale, you're gonna go on like this crazy party trip, and you're gonna be so happy. It's like, wow, I'm rich. But it's literally the opposite of that. To me, it felt like a massive wave of relief. I've been preparing for it for a couple of years with that as a potential goal, and then going through the sales process, which was exhausting. Being able to reach the final point where the money hits the bank account, it's more like I can finally take a break and get some rest and get my head straight, because this has been like a crazy, exhausting journey, is how it felt. Just a massive feeling of relief.
That's so fascinating, because we've heard that multiple times from founders in your position, and I think that's a really good challenge to the assumption that we all have that we're just going to be like popping champagne and like running around hugging everybody. So I love to hear it. It's wonderful. And so FIRE was obviously a big part of your thinking well before the exit. So I've got to assume you had a pretty clear financial plan put in place, ready for when this arrived. Is that right?
I'm pretty organized in that respect. Leading up to the sale, I discussed this with my wife as well. We did kind of an asset distribution plan where we put a bulk of the proceeds of the sale into market funds and S&P indexes. This is where most of it is right now. And the market has been doing very well in the last year, well, until recently, and there's a bit of uncertainty right now. We also put aside, I want to call it smaller chunks for each one of us as discretionary investment amounts. We divided like $3 million to each. We put it in our own individual accounts, and I'm using mine for angel investing in early stage B2B SaaS companies, while also putting most of it in practice in the market while, I'm waiting for deal flow. I already made a few investments in that arena. Obviously, that's a much higher risk kind of investment. So we allocated a certain amount to it, and we made sure that the bulk is there and would continue growing because we definitely don't spend that level of expenditure now or in the foreseeable future.
So tell me what the percentage breakdowns are of all of that.
I guess percentage-wise, it would be about 20%. So $3 million each, me and my wife. In our discretionary investing accounts, I already invested about $500,000 of it. Then we have about 18 million in big brokerages like Fidelity and Charles Schwab, in just market-wide and S&P indexes. We're also using that for a margin loan that we use to purchase land, and we're building a house.
I'm interested. How did your life change? What's your spending like now? What's your monthly spend today, and what was it before the exit?
Yeah, so our monthly spend hasn't changed significantly. We did move to a nicer apartment while we are building the house, which is going to take several years.
By the way, we'll have more on that house shortly.
We definitely increased our spend there. I want to say we pay about $7,000 a month in rent, which is high. We would never have considered this kind of rent levels before the exit. But other than that, our expenses are basically unchanged. I would say we spend maybe $15,000 a month tops when we are not traveling. One of the things that definitely increased is our travel expenses. We have family in the US. My wife's family is still in LA. I have family in Israel and friends. I have a brother in the UK. So we travel quite a bit, maybe 4 or 5 flights a year. And since the exit, we fly mostly business. So there's definitely a budget. I think for 24, it was around $70,000 just for travel, with the hotels and flights and everything around that. That's something that we feel like we can afford now, but was not really an option before the exit. Even though we were doing well financially, we were still finding tickets on the kayak and other cost-saving measures using. I still use points significantly. Credit card points in all the programs, all that stuff. It kind of fits my personality as well. I like to optimize situations.
So I'm really interested in this idea that, like, again, you can't take the fire out of the fire guy. So, like, when you get to that point when you've got a net worth of over $30 million,
yeah,
and you still feel that sense of, I don't know whether it's a sense of obligation or a sense of like discomfort with spending money or whatever. Like, I would say, like, a lot of the systems you were building around fire when you were the CTO in that role in Southern California, the reasons for adopting and working towards that fire situation are different to what your reality is today. And yet you still,
yep.
It seems like, act in really, really similar kind of ways that you did back then.
Well,
can you just talk to me about that?
Yeah, for sure. So it's a process. I'm definitely releasing the hold over time. For example, I recently bought a new laptop, right? The old laptop was fine, but it was 2.5 years old. And I'm like, why not just get a new laptop? I don't need to have those considerations anymore. So I'm definitely allowing myself to do that more now. So I would get like the top end laptop. But again, all those expenses are not, they don't add up to a lot of money. So that's kind of what it allowed me, because now it's rounding errors. And like, I don't really care. I can get the top end laptop. I can splurge more on the smartphone. I can get the top end, streaming package for all the services. I don't care. I have a YouTube Red. I disable the ads. And my wife is like, no, I will not pay YouTube to remove the ads. She still cannot release that. But I'm like, for sure, I would pay $10 a month to YouTube to not see any ads.
$10 a month for YouTube Premium isn't exactly a luxury splurge, but $70K a year on travel, that qualifies. Still, for the most part, Eran's day-to-day life hasn't changed all that much. Aside from the obvious stress relief of never having to worry about money or feeling trapped in a job that he doesn't want. But there have been a few things he wouldn't have been able to do, even if he had hit his original fire goals, but not exceeded them to the extent that he has. One of those things is the house he and his wife are having built. Another big ticket item was a bit more classic.
The one area where I allowed myself to splurge a little bit is the car. So I didn't used to be a car guy, but working in LA, everybody drives nice cars. Eventually I'm like, I can afford it. Let's get a nicer car. I got an entry-level Audi, an Audi A3, which really, to people who drive luxury cars, this is like, I don't want to say a junk car, but it's really a starter car in the luxury segment. It completely changed my mindset regarding cars. It's not just a tool to get from A to B. It can actually be a very pleasant experience. We have a car in Tokyo, which is by itself somewhat of a luxury. Tokyo is a very walkable city. It has amazing public transit. For the first year or so, we didn't have a car, but eventually we got one. And after the exit, I upgraded the car, even though I didn't really need to. It was a year-old car. This is splurging in my field. It's about a $70K car. I still have it on payments. It's 1.2K a month, which I know some people in the US pay for like a basic Dodge or whatever. So I still made sure that all the finances made sense to me. But after the exit, it's like, I don't really need a nicer car, but what the heck?
And then there's the biggest purchase of all so far, the house, which interestingly in Japan isn't exactly an investment.
We're now building a house here. We went for something that previously we would have thought was unattainable for us. So we bought a plot of land in center Tokyo in a very desirable area. It was quite expensive, and now we're building a house with like a top 1% architect, like award-winning, building a house with a very high level of finish. By the way, compared to California, it still feels like a massive discount. Just so it does help. The total cost of the land and the house would probably come to around, I want to say $5 to $6 million all in. And to get this level of finishes and quality in California, you would be paying 10, 15 million easy in a nice neighborhood. But real estate in general is not really an investment channel in Japan. Because of all the earthquakes that they have, the value of the house itself depreciates with time. It does not increase. So a 30-year-old house is basically depreciated to zero, and then the only value left is the value of the land. This format where real estate depreciates instead of increasing in price prevented a lot of the bad things that we see in a lot of those cities. You know, a lot of foreign investors coming in, buying a lot of property, artificially increasing costs and reducing supply. And the other aspect of it is there's no real shortage of housing in Japan. They build a lot, and they always make sure there's enough for everybody. There's a lot of public support there as well. So the competition is not as fierce. I'm going to, make an exception there because in the center of Tokyo, in the most desirable areas, for sure, the value of properties does increase, and it's more expensive. So if you want to live in those parts, yeah, you're going to pay a premium. It's still not the same as LA, New York, or London.
And did you do cash or use leverage for the house?
So I still use leverage. We took out a margin loan. So it's basically like getting a mortgage. It's funny because for high net worth individuals that don't have high consistent income, it's actually pretty hard to get. So we're using that for that purpose.
What made you decide to build rather than buy a home?
Yeah, that was also a process. Initially, after the sale, a few months after the sale, I was speaking to my wife and it's like, what do you think about looking at buying a house? We started looking at, nicer places, definitely. Going above $1 million for a house in Japan, that's already a luxury territory. So we saw some nice places, custom-built house, but every house that we went to, it felt very much like it was highly customized to the previous owner, the person who built it. We always found stuff like, this is weird. Like we visited one house where they, I don't even know how to explain this, but they had a bathroom on the first floor with a bathtub that can fit 8 people. And I'm like, yeah, kind of like a Turkish hot tub. And I'm like,
okay,
I don't know what you were doing here, but this is quite bizarre.
That's some interesting parties, perhaps.
Yeah, some interesting parties. That's exactly what my wife said. And I'm like, every house had something like that. And eventually I'm like, what do you think about building our house? It's like, maybe we should build our own. It's like, we keep looking at those places at this price range. It doesn't make sense to compromise. So it was kind of a process building up to, initially I was like, okay, we're going to buy a house in the $1.5 to $2 million range, to buying a plot of land that was by itself around $2 million, and then building a house on it. It was a process kind of slowly letting go. Again, it's a mindset shift to be able to spend this amount of money. Over time, we talked ourselves into it. It's like, this is an investment worth making in ourselves. We can afford it now. And this is really where having exited really made a difference, right? Buying the top of the line laptop. I could have technically done that earlier. We were doing fine financially. But this is really, was like, okay, post-exit, you earned it. This is where you can actually make a difference in your quality of life.
So what does life actually look like after a $30 million exit? Well, for Eran, it's not early retirement in the traditional sense. He is still working. Not because he has to, but partly because he wants to, and partly because, well, it helps him stay in Japan.
I am paid $220K annually, and I need that to maintain a certain visa here in Japan that puts me on an expedited track to permanent residency. So that's the main reason, and I probably would not need it past September this year, hopefully when it finishes. But this is what I'm paid right now. I am still with the company almost full time, so 15 to 20 hours a week, but it's all high-level stuff. I'm involved in all the high-level decision-making and the daily management team stand-ups and all that stuff. It's actually more fun now than it was leading up to the sale. discovering a whole new world post-exit. So now we have private equity partners. I'm learning what it's like working with private equity post-exit, recruiting an executive team. We really recruited a team of A players with, again, using resources that I never had access to, the recruiting firm that was connected to me by the private equity group. It's been fascinating going through those processes. I learned a ton from it.
So you haven't checked
and now
out?
we're going through, I'm definitely not checked out. We're going through the scale-up phase of the business, which is another thing that I never had experience doing. So now the goal is to go from $3 million in ARR to 30 in about 4 or 5 years. And I don't want to say I'm there for the ride because I'm also actively participating and contributing heavily, but I'm learning a ton from all the people that we brought in for customer success, for sales, for marketing, and the new CEO. We're all like feeding off each other. I'm fine not being the main guy anymore. I'm more than fine. I actually relish it to a degree.
Does that rub up against the part of you that kind of actively went after bootstrapping your own business for that kind of element of control? You know, do you...
Not really, because post-exit, I basically don't have to work another day in my life. So everything I'm doing right now, I'm doing because I enjoy it. And once I stop enjoying it, I can say, it's been great, but I'm moving on. Basically, what the exit gave me is you de-risk your professional life. You can just do what you like going forward. Doesn't mean that I don't put in effort when I feel like I need to, but it never feels like a burden. It did feel like a burden a lot leading up to the sale. You know, you have a lot of anxiety. I felt a high degree of burnout by the time we made it to the sale. What if we're not able to sell? Do I need to keep carrying this company for a couple more years to get to 5 or 6 or 7 million in ARR? Should I hire a professional CEO to come and replace me? I had all those questions. All that went away. I was able to sell at a price that basically I would not need for anything going forward. This allows me to just do the work that I like doing, contribute in the way that I feel I bring the most value. And it's very fulfilling. I do see myself eventually reducing my involvement in the day-to-day of the company and focusing on other initiatives. But for now, this is great.
This is what makes Eran's story so interesting compared to a lot of other founders we've talked to. A lot of people feel a strange sense of loss after selling their company, like they've let go of a piece of themselves, but not Eran. No existential crisis, no regrets, just a clean break, a deep exhale, and a sense of excitement for whatever's next. And with over $30 million and more coming, his next moves aren't driven by pressure, they're driven by curiosity and fun.
My long-term financial plan is continue with this FIRE model where I put most of my funds in the market and live off of the returns. I am investing in early stage B2B SaaS companies and also mentoring. That's part of what I'm doing there. So my model is kind of replicating the best parts that I took from the Tiny Seed program, which was the mentorship I received from the partners. And I'm doing this one-on-one with early stage founders. And I feel like I can increase the value of the company by doing that. So even though it's a risky investment, I feel like I actually have pretty good odds there, considering what I know now about building such companies. Also, learning a lot about the real estate game, buying a plot of land, and now almost a year working with an architect building this house. I'm extremely involved in the process. I definitely see myself getting more into that later as a developer. But yeah, I already went far and beyond what I thought I would need for me to not have to work. And now I'm more focused on, rather than maximizing my financial outcome, which is already incredible for me, I'm focusing more on doing things that are fulfilling and rewarding. So the engagements that I have with the early stage founders are extremely, extremely rewarding. I get so much out of those engagements. I'm doing a lot of personal work, therapy, and things of that nature. Work on myself now that I have more time to dedicate to it.
Yeah.
We plan on starting a family. That's going to be, all-consuming for a time. So yeah, focusing on things of that nature.
I love it, man. That's really, really awesome. Most founders feel a little lost after they sell. The business becomes a part of their identity. And when it's gone, they're left asking, now what? I've got to be honest, this is something I worry about because I can definitely relate to that problem. But Eran was different. He never built his company to define him. He built it to free him. From day one, his goal was early retirement and autonomy, not status, not legacy, not a fancy LinkedIn headline. And that focus never changed. The business was always a means to an end, not the end itself. He designed it to fit into his life, not take over it. And because of that, walking away didn't feel like a loss. It felt like the natural next step. Now he gets to use that freedom exactly how he planned, building a dream home, starting a family, and focusing on exactly what adds meaning. Not just more milestones or net worth, but more life. This is what it looks like when you play the game right. You still put in the work, you still grow, but you do it on your terms and you get to walk away on your own timeline. And now Eran has what most people want: freedom without pressure, growth without burnout, and the space to decide what comes next. Not out of obligation, but out of excitement. If you take one thing from Eran's story, it should be this: you don't need to chase status. Build something that fits your life, not something that takes over it. And that doesn't mean you can't grind. It just means you know when to let go of the grind. And that's when the freedom really starts. So if you're a founder trying to figure out what that next chapter looks like, whether you're scaling, selling, or just trying to make it all feel a little less lonely, that's exactly why Hampton exists. It's a private community of high growth founders who get it. People who've been through the highs, the lows, and everything in between. I'm a member myself, and I can tell you it's been huge for me. So if you're running a business doing 3 million in ARR or more, definitely go and check it out at joinhampton.com. And finally, a little plug for my company, Lower Street. We're actually the company that produces this very podcast. So if you're enjoying it and you're thinking to yourself, you want one just like it, would love for you to check us out at lowerstreet.co/Moneywise. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next week.